When he was 30 years old, Nick was a typical bloke who didn't believe in God. He rode and raced motorbikes, worked in the mines and partied with his mates, and he was living a pretty typical regular guy life. Then, one day, everything changed. He was involved in an accident that left him paralysed from the shoulders down. Nick tells the story of his accident and the impact that it had on his life, and his investigation into anything and everything that might help him, from visualisation, positive thinking to reincarnation to going to see the Dalai Lama. Ultimately, his search led him to investigate how he could have a personal relationship with God. This is an inspiring story by an inspiring man. It's about heartache, triumph, and how God can change your life. Enjoy. Nick, welcome to Revival on Air today.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be here.
Mate, excited to talk about your story because it's a really interesting one. There's lots of trauma in there and lots of amazing miracles that the Lord's done for you. How long has it been now since you've known God?
Well, originally I was spoken to around the start of 2013.
2013.
But it took some time for me to really realise that there was truth in it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So prior to 2013, who was Nick Benwell?
Oh, well, I suppose once I sort of, grown up and hit my teenage years, as I got a little bit on and a bit more independence, I really become heavily involved in the social scene. So I was always one of those guys that was there at every party that was going on, normally the one organising most of the stuff. So, and obviously with that, it became a bit of a drinking culture and so I suppose that sort of work hard, play hard type of lifestyle was what I was living. A mix of high-paced sports with the party atmosphere and working fairly hard in my career was sort of what I surrounded my life with a fair bit.
And it was one of those high-paced sports that really changed the direction or the course of your life.
Yeah, sure was.
Yeah. So you're pretty heavy into motorbikes?
Yeah, bikes for me started off as a bit of a hobby when I was young. So from quite a young age, I started getting a bit of a taste of racing bikes. And
so dirt bikes or road?
No, this is BMX. Yeah, and at the age of 6, I actually went into more of a statewide competition, so more serious sort of club racing.
Yeah.
And by the age of 9, 10, I was actually doing interstate meetings and stuff. So, yeah, we got pretty serious into the biking, myself and my brother. So, yeah, I was into the BMX right through until we sort of hit the teenage years where I progressed into dirt bikes and later on got involved in road.
So tell me about what happened on the dirt bike that day.
Yeah, so I'd been sort of, I suppose, 15, 16 years experience riding and did all kinds of different facets of it. So I had a dirt bike.
You're pretty good at it?
Oh, you don't want to blow your own trumpet, but I'll...
You were.
Yeah, I think what's Maverick's answer? I can hold my own. So, I did enjoy it and, I was able to be, fairly competitive with whatever facet I was doing of it.
Yeah, so you're not a hack punting around the forest for the first time?
Oh, not quite.
You knew what you were doing on your bike? Yeah.
So, I was out with a few friends and also my brother on it was a June Sunday, just out at a friend's property. And that particular day we were just hacking around, I suppose, on the fire tracks that were just surrounding his property. And, I just sort of come around a corner with a friend and I sort of cut through some reeds. It looked like that's all they were, just a few reeds. But there was a little tree stump hiding in the reeds and the back wheel clipped it and sent me flying over the handlebars. And, it was sort of an accident that I'd got myself up from quite a few times in the past.
So you've done similar things before?
Yeah, it'd come off in similar sort of circumstances. And even at the time, one of my, really close mates come off doing exactly, or he hit the same tree stump.
Behind you or in front of you?
Yeah. So we both went flying.
Yeah.
I was leading. So, but he did get himself up and the story was a bit different for me. So
do you recall, that as you'd hit the stump, did you recall what you thought at the time? Yeah, I do. There was a couple of things. I sort of hit the stump. I was pretty heavily protected in gear, so I had most of the stuff on that you would normally have on dirt bike riding. Body armour, that sort of gear? Yeah. I mean, I had all my elbow protection, knee protection, kidney belt, chest and back brace. So, I had more than just the helmet and gloves. So when I went flying over the handlebars, I remember thinking to myself, well, I haven't been flicked off for a while. And I just sort of thought, that's all right, just, I'm just going to land. And I got the gear on and, I sort of had that sort of thought running through my head. And, what happened though, it was a big thing. So when you came down, did you land on your head or on your back? Or no, I come down head first. Yep. So my head was hit first. Mm-hmm. And, it all happened fairly quickly. So, when my head's made impact with the sand, I just heard a bit of a crack and then I lost all sense of sensation in my body and my sort of legs flopped down behind me and I heard the thud, but it was a weird feeling. It was like I was still sort of upside down with my legs up in the air. So, all my feeling it's sort of like frozen time as my head hit. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that makes sense. What did you think when that happened? Yeah, well, I was laying there and then sort of a few seconds later you want to try and move to get up and I just couldn't move a thing. Couldn't move a limb, couldn't move my arms, my legs. Yeah. And you're sort of trying and you just haven't got this connection anymore. And everything was just frozen, just exactly what it was, just paralysed. Yeah. And your mate had come off directly after you? Yeah, so there were 5 of us up there at the time. 3 of us were circulating together. Yeah, this mate was directly behind me following my line. And so he come off as well. And there was a third guy that was probably 3-4 seconds behind us. And he sort of just buzzed around the corner and just saw the fallout from it. So he was the first one to start attending to us. So when he come over to me, I just said, dude, I can't move, I can't move. And he started trying to pinch my leg and he's telling me he's pinching my leg and I couldn't feel anything. And he just kept going, how about this? Can you feel this? Can you feel that? Can you feel that? And I couldn't feel a thing. And I just ended up saying, mate, it's freaking me out. Just stop. So, that was the end of that. And we got on to ringing some help. Yeah, so ring the 000. And I imagine that's a little bit of time before they get out there. Yeah, definitely. So the guy that come off, and we've been very close since the age of about 14, and even dirt bikes is sort of what brought us together at the age of 14 because he had one himself and that's when I got my first one. And we just become really close mates throughout our lives to the point where I was best man in his wedding. And he sort of stayed with me. And the other guy, Richie, he sort of took off back to the cars and grabbed the phone and got onto emergency services, let the other 2 know what's happened. And he sort of come back with the phone and we were sort of laying there for 35 minutes before the ambulance rocked up. Yeah. So they had to come from, I think there were 2 sent out, 1 from each town. We were right in the middle of Morgan and Blanchetown. So, we sort of had to wait for one of those to get out there and then find their way through the scrub to where we were. Yeah. And I assume they didn't drive you out? I assume there was a chopper involved at some
There
point.
was, yeah, got a chopper ride.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure there were better ways to get a chopper ride, but
yeah, the destination wasn't really what I was after. But anyway, yeah, look, before the ambulance even arrived, I was so short of breath. I was barely letting a whisper out. So that was the other thing that really impacted me.
And so what causes the shorter breath?
Well, because the spinal cord injury was so high, you actually lose a bit of function with your breathing. So a bit like the rest of my body was paralysed. It was basically shoulders down. That involved all my chest muscles. And your chest muscles is really what's responsible for a lot of your breathing. So I suppose if you can just imagine your chest being frozen and I'm trying to force air in and out of the lungs, but there's no room for it to expand and contract. So, yeah, it was, I remember explaining it as if you're breathing down a straw. Yeah. I just got a straw sucking in what you can. Yeah. So throughout the whole time, I felt like I could have stopped at any stage. Yeah. I was definitely thinking that, yeah, I was not looking good. Probably wasn't going to make it here, or there was a big risk of that not happening. So I just kept sucking in the air. I actually used my my brother, because he was there, as a bit of a drive, because he is a 6-year-old, lost his father, my stepdad, and he was unfortunately there having to wait for the coroner to arrive, which was obviously a bit distressing for us all. And I just had in my mind that I didn't want to put him through that again. And all I wanted to do was get in the back of that ambulance and then just basically give up and let them do whatever they can. But yeah, it wasn't feeling good. So I was sucking in the air. We're on the phone to 000 and they realised just how serious things were. So they made the call to send the chopper out before the ambulance even arrived. So that's that. And so you obviously get to the hospital. I assume it's all hands on deck at that point when you arrive, in terms of assessment and scans and all those sorts of things. Yeah, so when I arrived at the hospital, we went in for x-rays straight away, and they ended up obviously seeing the extent of the break. My mum was phoned up and told to get in there immediately because they didn't know if I was going to make it or not. So yeah, we had all the x-rays done, and then it was followed with a bit of a conversation sort of with mum, and that relayed through to me. And it was really touch and go as to whether the doctors felt it was worth operating or not. Right. Because of the severity of the injury and also the prognosis of what sort of life I'd be left with at the other end of it. Yeah. And so fused the spine, is that what the operation was about? Was to sort of stable up where your brakes were? Yeah, well basically they'd have to take care of my breathing. So we had to get tubes down my throat, so heavily sedated, get the tubes down the throat to get the oxygen pumping in and out through a ventilator. And we had to get fused up. We actually got the top 5 vertebrae were all fused directly to my skull. So yeah, there was a fairly big fusion took place there. So that was an operation which lasted around 6 odd hours to get that done, sort of face down on the table, and they just cut the back of the neck open and got that fused up, and then got me into ICU. How long was it after that did you regain consciousness after the operation? It was a while before I was 100% with it. Yeah. Because of the tubes down my throat, I had to be heavily sedated for the whole time. That's. Yeah, I mean we're talking days. Yeah. So there were days of just coming in and out of consciousness almost, and I remember snippets of people that come in and saw me at the time, but just real small flashes here and there. So that went on for a few days, I think, and then they eventually got a tracheostomy put through my neck, which then allowed the tubes to come out of my throat, and that sort of freed me up. The sedation dropped down. And so at what point did were you sort of fully conscious, aware of
what had happened, the operation, and what the future might look like for you?
I suppose we would have been talking within the first week. I'm sort of now, breathing through a ventilator through my neck. So I'm looking fairly normal apart from this ventilator through my neck. But obviously I'm left laying there sort of paralysed, unable to move. They're very, very aware these days not to tell anyone, look, prognosis is you're never going to walk again or move again or this is permanent, because the spinal injury can be so varied and some people can gain recovery back depending on whether it's a type of spinal shock or they just really don't know anything until the swelling goes down. So I suppose for those initial few weeks, I'm holding out a fair bit of hope that we're going to actually it's all just going to be over and done with, hopefully, at some stage. But for those that are a bit more professional and knowledged in the game, they knew sort of deep down this one was pretty serious and, probably wasn't going to recover from this one. So, when I was in ICU, it took a few weeks for it to really sink in that, we're not looking too flash here and, we could be in for the long haul. So
I imagine that would have been hard for a man, who was pretty active out there.
Yeah, so I suppose you're laying there in hospital and you're sort of left in a state where you've got all your thoughts are all completely, everything's just working well cognitive-wise, but your body is just totally paralysed and inactive. So you're left in a state where you're in the hospital bed, you're looking straight at the ceiling, so you can't look left, can't look right, you can't move anything, you can't talk because you've got a ventilator bypassing your vocal cords. Initially couldn't even eat, drink. That was all done through nasal gastric and IV. So you're just left in a state where physically you can't do anything at all, but your mind's as active as it ever was before. So, it's pretty tough. And there was a point, and I remember this bit so clearly, which was a few weeks into it, where I just remember screaming out to something within myself, and I don't know what or who I was talking to, but I just remember screaming out silently. I lived a good 30 years. I didn't have any health complications or any issues at all health-wise through my life. It was quite a very fortunate life that I had and a healthy body I was given. And I had a lot of what I thought was fun out there in the world living, and I just thought, look, I've had a good 30 years and what's the point in now living another 30 years when I'm just going to die anyway? I should have just died in that crash. So I suppose the thought was, I've done that 30 years. What is the point of continuing on when it's just going to be a struggle now and the end goal or the end result is going to be death anyway? So, that was probably the big point where I just went, what's the point? And I'd sort of started to regret the fact that I had survived it.
Yeah. Did that change, or did you hold those thoughts with you for a while?
No, I suppose I held those thoughts for quite a while. Yeah. So it was, there was nothing coming my way that would suggest that there was anything worth reversing that sort of thought that I had.
So when did the conversation of God start? Because obviously you weren't really a believer up until that point.
Not at all. And even at the point of when I was back there at that crash scene and I was laying there sort of obviously fighting for life and even thinking that I might not make it, for me there was no thoughts of God running through my mind or, wanting for him to help. And, that's where my belief was. I never grew up with any belief in God. I just always thought it was an outdated concept that was made up by man. And we since had, technology and knowledge that now outdated the Bible in my view. although the Bible's something I'd never read or looked into ever in my life before. So, yeah, my belief was
0.
right at the bottom end. There was just not even a thought of whether it was or wasn't. I just never entertained the idea.
Yeah.
So, and a bit of an example of that was when I was in ICU, and I had this good mate of mine who had come off with me on the bike before. He sort of come and said to me one day, "Oh, look, there's this priest at the door. He's sort of doing the rounds, and he wanted to come in and speak to you a bit about God." He goes, "I just thought I'd let you know." And this mate was very good at lip reading. For a lot of people, I had to actually communicate through an alphabet board, using my eyes to blink whenever I got to the letter I wanted. But he could lip read me really well. I suppose we just sat close, you know. So I just basically mouthed to him, which he picked up straight away. I just said, "Mate, I don't want to hear about this God stuff and everything's going to be all right." I said, "Just show me the science." And that was my answer to that. And so he goes, "All right." So he went out and said, "Yeah, sorry, he's not interested in God at all." So from that conversation, it actually turned around because, interesting enough, it was his father-in-law that approached Pastor Tony.
Yeah. So your good mate's father-in-law.
Yeah, he lived across the road from Pastor Tony. And it was him that approached Pastor Tony and told him about my situation. And originally, due to this conversation I'd had with my friend about not wanting to involve or worry about going down any road to do with God, that led on to, I suppose, it being a little while before Pastor Tony actually made a connection with coming to see me.
What did he talk to you about when he first came and saw you?
So, yeah, after Pastor Tony was aware of my situation, he sort of said to this friend of mine's father-in-law that, he'd be happy to come and see me. Like I said, because of my answer to this priest previously, my friend sort of said, "Oh, thanks for the offer, but he's not really interested in that stuff." And it was his wife, who was actually, very close friends as well. We all sort of went to high school together. That she actually told me about the conversation her dad had with Pastor Tony. But for some reason, she used this interesting angle. She said, he sort of, lives across the road from Dad and he's into spiritual healing. And that sort of thought of tapping into something that could somehow bring about some sort of healing, that's what really pricked my ears up. And that's what made me go, look, I wouldn't mind speaking to this guy.
As we all do when we've got something that seems incurable, we think about, well, what are the options? What are the different options out there that Western medicine hasn't come up with yet?
Yeah.
Was that where your head was at, is I'll look at anything?
It definitely was. I suppose for me, I had an accident where I went from, having what you'd say, everything running for me, everything going for me, and in an instant, that was all taken away. And, I still thankfully had my mind and my brain working, but every other facet of my body and all my freedoms and all that was taken away in a flash. So that change is quite hard to do. And you sort of just want to get things back to where they were. So it's just natural to want that. So, yeah, anything that was out there that might suggest bringing about the body being healed, I was looking into it. So prior to Pastor Tony actually coming to talk to me, I'd looked into a few things. So I had nurses at the rehab facility I was at, giving me their various different things that they believed in and thought of. So ended up at a seminar for the Dalai Lama in the convention centre, which was quite weird. I went along a bit hopeful there and come away with, thinking that's, nothing but someone who's lived a little while, given a bit of worldly wisdom, and there was nothing much there for me. And obviously I was looking into thoughts around visualisation and thoughts around, positive thinking and getting your mind to do the healing, and there was all kinds of stuff I was looking into like that, but it was all just heading down dead ends, I suppose. And I even spoke to one nurse who was pretty convinced about, coming back and reliving in another body, and, just we all just keep circulating around. We die and we come back as someone else. And I even looked into a few books through her that I was able to listen to audio or use this page turner they'd set up for me.
Yeah.
So I looked into a few things like that, but everything was just, coming quickly to a dead end and going, no, this has got nothing there. So I suppose when I heard about this spiritual healing type aspect, I grabbed onto it straight away and wanted to hear a little bit more about it.
So Pastor Tony comes and sees you.
Yep.
He keeps coming back and seeing you, doesn't he?
Yeah, so we originally, I actually originally ended up leaving the rehab for a day and heading to my friend's house, and they were pretty good. They used to help lift me out of the wheelchair and got me comfy in a recliner, and we organised for Pastor Tony to come down, and they left the two of us together in the living room for what ended up being a few hours. And we had a good chat about things, and he was sort of opening the Bible up to me, which is something I'd never looked into in my life, and I actually resisted ever looking into it. But I remember at the time thinking to myself, well, look, I've never looked into this thing, and I'm in this position now, why not? Let's just let him open it up and show us what's there. So he was really focusing on the fact that there was healings available through this. And so I was interested to hear more. Not that I thought there was a God out there doing the healings, but I just thought there must be some ancient wisdom locked up in this book that you could tap into. And that's probably what I was sort of interested to look a bit more into. So after our conversation, he said, look, I'm happy to come and see you at the rehab facility. And it ended up setting up as a bit of a weekly thing that he would pop in for an hour or so, and he would have a bit of prayer with me, and I'd just sort of listen to what he had to say and chat a bit more about things revolving around healings that he had experienced, as well as, things that were written in the Bible. And we just went on from there.
I mean, obviously, eventually you got baptised and you received the Holy Spirit. Yeah,
it was quite some time before I really started to see a little bit more into it.
What was it that you saw that made you change your thinking around maybe there is a God?
Yeah, well, as we sort of went on, he kept sort of saying, well, you've got to check out a bit more, you've got to do a bit more. And I suppose I ended up at what ended up being my first meeting, which was June 2013 convention at the convention centre. Funny enough, I was just there a few months earlier for the Dalai Lama, and now I'm back again. But
so it is
this
direct
time,
comparison between the Dalai Lama and the Revival Fellowship Church Convention.
Yeah, so I went and saw one of these meetings and met quite a few people there, and everyone was quite nice and helpful, and there was a very genuine feel to the whole thing. But anyway, I was there just checking a few things out, and Pastor Tony had brought in a few people throughout the time as well with him that I was just meeting more and more, and a few people come in like Andrew Costanis and others that have had remarkable things happen in their life in obviously very life-threatening situations. And so I was hearing more and more, and eventually ended up attending a few meetings out at Gawler. And it was out there that I heard a testimony in particular that just really, really made me start to think, hang on, this has got to be more than just tap into a few positive thoughts.
And what was it? What was the testimony about?
Well, it was, she'd basically got herself in a bit of a mess. She'd become addicted to heroin, contracted hepatitis, and was in quite a bad way. And she had returned home from Queensland back with her parents, and it was back there that she sort of wanted to sort of get hold of more heroin. I believe she wanted to get in contact with an old drug dealer that she had back here in Adelaide. And when she got in contact with him, he said, I'm done, I'm clean, I'm finished with all that, and started to preach the gospel to her. So she went and checked the meeting out, and she got baptised. And she said when she came out of the water, she received the Holy Spirit, she spoke in tongues, and immediately from there, everything changed. She said from that point, when she come out, she said the addiction to heroin left her, so she never touched the stuff again. She was an abuser of marijuana and alcohol, and she said she got rid of the marijuana. She tipped her alcohol down the sink when she got home. Cigarettes just completely gone, healed of that. She said she'd stopped swearing, and she used to be quite a heavy swearer as well. And then to just top it all off, when she went back to the doctors at some stage later on, they told her the hepatitis was completely gone from her body. And I knew I'd been around people throughout my party scenes that had got themselves addicted into some pretty messy drugs, and I knew what a hold that could have on you, and to just go through this baptising process, receive this spirit, and suddenly all that stuff's gone like you never done it, and you just cleaned inside and out. I thought, this is too much for this to happen in an instant. And that's what really, really got me thinking there's a fair bit more here. So that started it. I saw my sister and my mum come along in that same year, and they had a very different mindset to me, and they grabbed onto it straight away and were baptised and spirit-filled, and received in the tank. And just hearing them speaking forth in that new language, and then just seeing the change in both of their lives. All this sort of stuff really, obviously made me start to realise that I could be wrong here, and started looking into things a bit more. So obviously went on, and I was baptised and received the Spirit myself, and just been getting stronger and stronger, I think.
And so what's that, about 8 years ago now?
Well, from just been 9 years since first meeting I attended. So it was a bit of a slow process for me, very analytical and looking into it. But I suppose
were you always like that? Were you always analytical, or did your accident sort of heighten your sense of analysing things?
No, I think I was always pretty fairly practical with my thoughts, whether I was educated enough, to entertain those thoughts or prove those thoughts. But no, I was always one that would want to see a bit of proof before doing anything. So in some ways it was good for me to be so hard and critical at the start, to really know that I'm not just getting swept up in something that was a bit airy-fairy or wishy-washy, and to really make sure that there was truth there before I went any further or followed on.
Was there a moment when you changed your reason from I want a healing to I want to know God, or I want salvation? Was there a change? Was there a time when that changed?
Yeah, it was still a fair bit on, but there was just a point where I just suddenly just had this conviction and realisation about what this big picture is. And you start to find scriptures where it says, your life is but a vapor, and you just start to realise that is all it is, and what the big picture is that we're looking at. And the fact that getting a healing is just basically you've got that for a small part of that vapor, but what is that without salvation? And so there was a point there somewhere where I just got a conviction that salvation was the key.
So what's the Lord done for you along the way since you were baptised and Spirit-filled?
Well, I suppose a lot of people can look from the outside, from the world, and think, he was sort of holding on to this hope of getting, healed by God, and nothing's sort of happened. But people outside, I suppose you just don't realise, what that big picture is all about and the healings that come from it. So I've just had an incredible amount of blessings along the way. I mean, I've just ticked over 10 years since having my spinal cord injury, and I've just recently been going through some reports and things with the occupational therapist. And one of the things I realised is she was writing down things to do with the extent of my injury and all the scenarios and fallouts that come from having an injury like that. And she started talking about the fact, how susceptible I am to pressure sores, susceptible to certain infections due to the way things need to be managed with my body below my injury, the risk of severe illness or death, even from just simple chest infections and stuff. And the list just seemed to go on. And I just remember going through haven't had to deal with that, haven't had to deal with that, haven't had to deal with that. And I mean, people in my position, hospital can be a regular thing yearly, and I've just not had to worry about any of that. So I've had an incredibly good run with this injury, and you just know all of that's just, a blessing from God. Like even the physios say when they work with me, they've just said there's no one in as good a condition that we know of as what you are this far into your injury with the level of injury you've got. And there's others around the industry that say there's no one we know with an injury your level that's doing as much physically as what you're doing, I suppose.
You're a pretty big evangelist. You love telling people about the Lord, don't you? But you don't hold back telling people all about.
Yeah, well, it took me a while to get going. But like I said, once you get that bit of that conviction for yourself and then you start to, there's two aspects to it. You want to be, letting everyone know about it, because you don't want them to miss out. You start to realise how big this thing is, and secondly, you've got a real conscience that you want to be repaying the Lord. You want to be doing His work, and that's what He commissions us to do. And you want to feel like you're fulfilling that commandment of His, I suppose.
So, how do you reconcile the fact that you haven't been healed yet? What does that, when people ask you that question, what do you say? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I tell them that obviously I believe in healings, and I've seen it happen, and we know of people within our fellowship who have just got themselves out of a wheelchair, been lifted into baptism tanks, and they've got out and walked out. So I know there are miracles that happen, but as we all know, we don't know the mechanics of how that all comes about. And I just see myself that I'm particularly in a country that can support my injury quite well, where I can live a fairly full life. And one thing I remember being told by Pastor Paul in a conversation early on is I sort of mentioned about the extent of my injury and the prognosis being that I probably won't get off the ventilator, so I'll be stuck relying on that to breathe. But just getting off of that and just being able to talk normally, and obviously being able to get around more easily, so I'm not having to lug around a ventilator and all the complications that go with that. And I remember him saying, sounds like the Lord's given you everything you need to do His work and preach the gospel, and that's what it is. So like I said, I see this life as a vapour, and it is a miracle that I am off that ventilator, given the height of my injury, and that's backed up by a lot of medical professionals.
So Nick, if 30-year-old Nick who came along to his first church meeting looking for a healing, had gotten healed right there and then, do you reckon he would have stuck around to find out what God was really about?
Yeah, well, I suppose when I think about that question, I suppose the truth is I don't know. I suppose it's a little bit like looking back and saying, well, had someone come and approached you about the gospel prior to your injury, do you reckon you would have stuck around long enough to see if it was true or not. And
you probably wouldn't have, right? Because you had that situation in the hospital where the priest was there, wanting to talk about God. At that point, you were not interested.
Well, yeah, I would have thought that I couldn't have thought of any other way that this could have happened without me being literally stopped in my tracks from the lifestyle I was living, and then getting the gospel shown to me, and really just having no other distraction or nowhere else to turn. That I would just listen to more, and obviously be desperate to be knowing if there is any truth there because of the situation I was in. So I look back now and I just go, I think, everything just, things happened the way they had to happen for me to get to where I am. And even just to the point of having Pastor Tony being the one to come and visit me initially. I mean, I sort of think about other people and just slotting them into that position, and I just don't even see that happening too much with others, because Pastor Tony was just very persistent. He said he would have stopped coming in at any stage had I'd said to him, I've had enough of this. But he was just very committed to, which is probably the better word, committed, to continue to come in as long as I was happy to hear more and more. So
God sent the right person to you at the right time.
Yeah, and he was a man from down south that ended up getting placed in Gawler, probably not anywhere himself and Julie would have seen themselves going. He was stuck right across the road from, my best mate's father-in-law. And it all just come about the way it come about. And now they've packed up and they're back down south.
Yeah, all things work together for good, as the scripture goes.
They certainly do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, mate, thank you so much for sharing your story with me and with those who are listening to it. It's an inspirational story. It's great to see a big smile on your face when you're talking about what God's done for you.
Yeah, well, I suppose looking back and as you reflect on these things, you're just in awe of, where you were with life.
Yeah.
And how close it was to being, lights out, shows over back then. And even though I had no thought for God, not even didn't even sort of even investigate into him, when I was at that point where I was, it was nearly the end, he still was right there. He stepped in and he's been patient with me, and he's brought me into his salvation. So, yeah, it's an amazing thing to reflect back on.
It is amazing, mate. Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you.
Nick, thank you so much for sharing your story with us all, and thanks to our wonderful God for bringing you into his flock and all the wonderful things that he's done for you. I've included a link in the podcast episode show notes to Nick's sister's amazing testimony too. Depending on the podcast app you're using right now, you should be able to swipe to get to the link. Otherwise, head to the webpage revivalontheairtoday.com. If you're listening and want to know more about how God can change your life or save you or perform a miracle for you, then send us an email, podcast@revivalontheairtoday.com, or connect to us via Instagram and Facebook. Just search for Revival on the Air Today. I hope you join us again. Until next time, God bless.